Welcome everyone again for watching another series of Ecommerce Roundtable. Welcome everyone, I'm Ryan Kramer with Ping Pong Payments, and this is part 4 of simplifying selling into Southeast Asia. We're going to be talking about, in previous ones, we've actually talked about selling in different parts of the world, and with my panel of experts today, if you haven't seen 1 through 3, my panel of experts today is here to help simplify and answer questions into selling into Southeast Asia. Obviously, that depends on different countries, different marketplaces. We're going to give a holistic overview of our expertise as service providers, sellers in the past as well, but also helping you grow your business in e-commerce or on Amazon into those regions. So with me, I brought a bunch of friends in the space who are experts in various parts of the field, and go ahead and kick off and do a quick introduction of everyone on board. With me is the knowledge, the knowledge bank of people, if you will, in the Amazon and e-commerce industry that we've accumulated over this time. It's been great to talk with these gentlemen all over the world, no matter in the morning or afternoon where we are in the world. We're all kind of the collective, if you will. So gentlemen, welcome again. We were just kind of catching up before this. So welcome for part 4, which is kind of crazy. We've already done, no, this is the 4th one of these. Absolutely. So that being said, let me go ahead and kick it off. If we do a quick round table with Jonathan, Paul, and then Francois, go ahead and give a quick introduction. If this is your first time listening to us, go ahead and quickly introduce yourself, and we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and start?
Thanks, Ryan. Always a great introduction. I'm Jonathan from VAT Global. I manage the partners and e-commerce sales function within VAT Global. VAT Global really is a outsourced VAT compliance and technology firm. We really take the pain and difficulty of managing your global taxes away. We'll do it through a variety of different mechanisms, tools, online tech, and really just make it that you can focus on your selling. You'll see the other panelists will really do something similar in a different space so you can really focus on your selling. Thanks.
Awesome. Paul, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm Paul. I am the founder of Merchant Spring. We are a global SaaS business focused predominantly on professional marketplace sellers and marketplace agencies, and providing them with the analytics, dashboards, and insights to reduce a whole lot of administrative time and actually help you focus on driving sales. And we do that across 70 different marketplaces right now. A lot of that obviously focused on Amazon, but a whole range of others as well, including some of the region we're talking about today.
Awesome. And then why don't we go ahead and talk with Francois?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for putting all this together and for the awesome introductions. I am Francois, the co-host of Link Up Leaders and part of the founding team here at Noviland. And we handle global sourcing, general supply chain management, logistics, production oversight, quality control inspections, the whole 9 yards for any Amazon seller or e-commerce seller that needs to source anything from overseas. We do it all in a centralized platform.
Awesome. And of course, I'm last but least of the group. I am Ryan Kramer with Ping Pong Payments, host of Crossover Commerce. If you're familiar with my face, that's where you'll see me. And then also partnerships and brand manager of this great company. We do cross-border payments for both sending and receiving worldwide, sending to 170 different countries, but also receiving up to 10 different currencies to help save you, the e-commerce and Amazon seller, more money. That being said, we put our heads together to come up with these different regions of the world. And guys, a great statistic that kind of was released this week, if you will, about 2020, I read that in Asia Pacific, that 63% of the total global sales were done in Asia Pacific. That is in e-commerce, and that is a massive amount of sales that's happening in that general area. So that being said, if more than half of the e-commerce is being done in the Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia entity of the world, why aren't more people talking about it? So that's why we kind of put our heads together. Just wanted to share that statistic today. That was sourced by eMarketer and Statista, where I got that as well, so you can reference it there. But just want to kind of preface that as why we're talking about that. It's obviously a big topic of how to sell in Southeast Asia. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and kick off this brain trust, if you will, of going, here we go. Let me go ahead and pull in our little presentation, if you will. I believe we have Paul going first. You're like our leadoff hitter, if you will, for baseball, going over everything. So market overview, Paul, go ahead and, if you will, take us away.
I love to go first. I always get to do the colorful slides and tee everything up for the colleagues that go behind me. But yeah, look, guys, let's dive into it. Let's talk a little bit about Southeast Asia. Let's paint the picture. So Southeast Asia, what are we actually talking about, right? Because as Ryan mentioned, we're not always thinking about this part of the world a lot. Probably doesn't get as much media attention as some of the other markets. So let's just paint a picture. So Ryan, if you can give me the next slide, and let's just talk about what are we actually talking about here. Next one. Yep, excellent. First thing I'd say is in Southeast Asia, those are the typical, most of the countries. I haven't got them all there, but they're typically included in this, right? So as you can see, I've highlighted a couple of them, the biggest ones and the most mature ones. The first thing I would say is when it comes to population, there are some enormous population sizes across Southeast Asia. So, obviously, for those of you who know, Indonesia being one of the most populous countries on earth with 262 million people living in that space and actually, experiencing quite strong population growth. You've got Vietnam, Thailand, Bangladesh, Philippines, all having, very large populations as well. But what's interesting is, these countries are all at different stages of maturity when it comes to e-commerce and different growth. So I actually, went to statistic as well and just plugged the size of the e-commerce product sort of retail market in each of the countries. As you can see, there are some really big differences, right? So Indonesia is by far the largest country in terms of population, but, the total market about 38 billion. For its size of the population, that is still relatively small, and you should really think about Indonesia as a fast-growing but really emerging market when it comes to e-commerce. And then on the other side, you've got places like South Korea. They have been in the e-commerce game for very long, very well developed. Arguably, depending on how you look at it, certainly well more developed than what we have here in Australia. Probably on par with the US, maybe even ahead of it. So there's some really vast differences here. I would say the most developed markets right now, sort of roughly in order in Southeast Asia, really would be, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore. Those would be sort of the top three, followed by, Thailand, and then you get into some of the other markets. The other thing I would say is, as you can look at this map of Southeast Asia, for those that love studying geography, you can see there's a lot of islands and a lot of water in between. So, I'm sure we'll get onto it, but, logistics and sending things across obviously is challenging here. The other thing I would say is, these are different countries, different regulations, different governments and the like, and different languages, right? So while sort of, English is obviously spoken in Singapore, is one of the main languages in Malaysia. A lot of these other markets like Thailand, South Korea, Vietnam, and pretty much all the others, local language is really important, particularly when it comes to selling products, on marketplaces and the like. So, and, by way of offering customer support. So there is an additional complexity here that, many sellers may not have come across as well. Now, just for context, I have excluded some other countries that are sort of on this map that are also pretty big, and we're not really covering them in these roundtable series, but it's certainly maybe doing a separate session on them. But just sort of to put a stake in the ground here. Obviously, there's China, probably one of the largest, if not the largest, e-commerce market globally. That is a whole 3 roundtable sessions, but on its own. So I won't go into too much detail there. Of course, here we've got India, right? So part of Asia. Has a really big Amazon presence, which I'll talk about in a sec, and a massive e-com market population and really, really growing. It's actually a big topic of interest for a lot of international sellers now. So, maybe we can talk a little bit about that as well. And then there's Japan. Can't really show it on this map, but it's that sort of little island, right sort of in the middle towards the slight right there. Japan is interesting because Japan is like really, really mature when it comes to e-commerce, right? $112 billion market. Amazon, I was looking up this yesterday, Amazon has been there almost for more than 20 years. So, very well-established presence there, very mature market, and very interesting, I think, from an Amazon seller point of view. And then we've got Taiwan as well. So Taiwan, again, a little bit like South Korea, and of course, I don't want to stereotype by any means, but in terms of maturity, in terms of e-commerce, a very, very, very mature market. So I just want to sort of, put that out there just to paint a little bit of more context. I won't talk about Australia because we've covered that in round one, and you can look at the recording there. So that's just the picture, quite complex, in terms of languages, geographies, populations, and maturity levels in terms of the different markets here. So let's just maybe start with the Amazon picture, right? Because a lot of you guys are selling on Amazon. So let's just have a look at, what's Amazon's presence in this space. So decided to use a slightly different map just for clarity. Really, the key takeaway here is, there's a lot of, literally and figuratively, there's a lot of white space here because Amazon hasn't really built a sizable presence in Southeast Asia. It has an enormously strong presence in India, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. It's really the number one player now in India, depending a little bit on metric you look at. Japan, as I mentioned before, it's been in Japan. It's the number one player. It's much larger than Rakuten, the domestic player in Japan, and it's been there since 2000. Now, I was trying to remember when Amazon launched in Europe, but I think it's around a similar time. So the maturity of the Amazon ecosystem in Japan is very similar to what you're used to, in Europe from that point of view. So actually, a really attractive option. As long as you can, get your translation into, the Japanese language sorted, and there's lots of people who can help you with that. But a really attractive market. And then lastly, Amazon did enter Singapore in 2019, around the same time they launched in Australia. They actually, funny enough, they launched with just an Amazon Prime offer only, and their marketplace wasn't open to sellers at the start, but it is now. What's interesting there is Amazon Singapore is still small, and it really feels like it's a little bit of a beachhead they sort of put down. And I'm really keen to see what Amazon is going to do next in the space, because sort of on a global basis, this is an area of enormous population growth. If you want to continue to grow your global business, you really want to be exposed to this region. So I think Amazon is only just gearing up in this space. Now, that does beg the question, what are the options? Who is playing here? And actually, there are two really big players. You may have heard of these guys or may not. So we have on the left here a business called Lazada. So Lazada was founded in 2012. It covers probably the largest and most mature countries in Southeast Asia. And I think there's a deliberate reason for that. So right now, that's Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Singapore. I haven't called that out here. They were actually acquired by Alibaba a couple of years ago. So Alibaba, obviously, owner of Tmall, Taobao, massive e-commerce giant in China. Alibaba is also looking at this region as a source of, where they need to get a real strong foothold, and I've done that through the acquisition of Lazada. Now, just to give you a bit of background on Lazada, Lazada was actually started by a business called Rocket Internet, which is a massive business out of Europe. They are famous, certainly, 10 years ago, for looking at other business models, copy them, and replicating them in other regions. So that is exactly what they did with Lazada. So Lazada actually was modeled on and feels a lot like Amazon. Right. So what is great for sellers in terms of Lazada is if you're used to selling on Amazon and all of a sudden you enter the Lazada ecosystem, you sort of go, oh, actually, there's a lot of similarities here. Actually, a lot of things feel familiar, similar concepts, similar way the APIs work, similar the way they've set it up. They even have this fulfillment service, and you've probably guessed it, called Fulfilled by Lazada, right? With some, pan-European, Southeast Asian fulfillment, not too dissimilar what you see in other Amazon regions. So Lazada is actually a really good platform for, I think, as a place to start first. If you have experience, selling on Amazon, it will be the most familiar to you. On the other big player in this market is a player called Shopee. They're launched in 2015, so really not that old, as you can sort of gives you a bit of a flavor of how fast this space is evolving. They are across 7 countries in Southeast Asia, so the same ones as Lazada, with the addition of Taiwan. So they're also focused there. As a side note, they also have a presence in Mexico and Brazil, which I found very, very interesting. So they're looking to obviously expand the other way and looking at South America as an emerging market. Now, they also claim, interestingly, to be the #1 e-commerce app. So they all claim the #1 position using slightly different definitions. You know, that's what I would do, use the definition that suits me. They were listed on New York Stock Exchange in 2017, and Tencent, which is another really large conglomerate out of China, you would have heard of it, has bought a majority or a large stake in that business as well. So as you can see, big e-commerce players from China making massive investments in the region in Southeast Asia. So I think this is a little bit of a battleground where I think Amazon will start to go head to head with really, and to some extent have already, with the other e-commerce giants in the region, predominantly out of China. Actually, on China, just a little side note for those of you, I had it on the previous slide. For those of you who know, Amazon actually retreated from China, I think in 2019. So they withdrew. So it just gives you a sense of, just the battlegrounds, different battles. You lose some, you win some. Where you're going to focus. And I think all of this competition, at the end of the day, is going to be great for marketplace sellers, because there's heavy investment going in there in terms of fulfillment, infrastructure, seller tools, as well as just options and obviously competition for sellers will lead to lower fees and those sorts of things. So it is really I think this is, in my view, a space to really watch in the next 5 years. If I can then go to obviously a lot of detailed information here, but this was a bit of research we did at Merchant Spring about a year ago, and we looked at each of these markets, or the major markets that you may want to consider entering into in Southeast Asia, and I've included some of the other markets sort of in North Asia and in West Asia as well, just to give you a sense of who are the key players, how many sellers they're on the platform, as well as what percentage of sellers are local or domestic, just to give you a sense of what's happening from a cross-border point of view, and are these markets really open to international sellers? By the way, don't worry about writing all this down, because we've got these materials available for you at our landing page at merchantspring.io/ecommerce-round-table. But
and if that was too confusing, you can just check out the comment section or the show notes below, and you'll be able to click it from there. Anyways, continue, Paul.
Much easier. Thank you. Thank you. I will stop talking soon, by the way. But let me just talk a couple of highlights here, just to give you a sense of what these markets are like, right? So Malaysia, very well established. Actually, English language works, easiest to enter. So Shopee is the #1 player, followed by Lazada. So here you can see Shopee #1, and you can see from the amount of sellers, Shopee is in a much stronger position than Lazada has. Only 50% of the sellers are local. So it gives you a sense of, actually, there's a lot of cross-border activity going on within Southeast Asia from a seller point of view. And then we have Lilong, which is, I call it like, it's a bit like the eBay. I'm probably not doing this justice, but the local domestic eBay of Malaysia, right? So they're just there doing both new and secondhand goods. There is actually Zalora on this list as well. So Zalora is a fashion marketplace only, backed by the same group that backs the Iconic here in Australia. They're a bit like, for those of you who are familiar with Zalando, think of them as the Zalando of Southeast Asia, predominantly selling fashion across most countries in Southeast Asia. Obviously, much smaller from a seller point of view, because they focus on just one particular category, which is fashion and accessories. Singapore overall is a really small market. Outside of Lazada and Shopee, there's Q10 as well, which is the larger player there. Singapore tends to be used as a bit of the base, right? A lot of businesses will set up their HQs there. Singapore, as a market domestically, is probably not as interesting because it's a small country, but as a base to reach out into the rest of Southeast Asia, it's attractive. As you can see, Thailand, Shopee again, #1 position by a mile, and then you also have a local player called Kaidi. Obviously, language and in translating your product pages into Thai, running advertising in Thai, and providing customer support in that language is critical. Same can be said for Vietnam, although Shopee, again, #1 position, a couple of local players, Sendo and Tiki. Now, here are some interesting ones. Indonesia. So as you can see, Shopee, Lazada, the #1 and #4, but they're two really large domestic marketplaces you really want to keep an eye on, particularly the top one, Tokopedia. And I'll get on to the next slide in a sec, but there's some really exciting stuff happening there. Indonesia is the largest country in Southeast Asia, so really, and probably one of the fastest growing, so really worth keeping an eye on. And then some of the others. So outside of Southeast Asia, just wanted to give you a view. India, as you can see, Amazon is the largest, but you've got a range of marketplaces here, and it's very common for Indian sellers to be across 6, 7 different markets. So, some really big conversations in there as well. What you can see, though, is a lot of the sellers are local here. The percentages of local sellers across most marketplaces, is very topping out at the high 90s, meaning it's actually not as easy as an international seller to set up shop there. It's becoming easier, but not as easy as you'd probably like. Just rounding it off, we've got South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. Japan, as I mentioned, really is the easy option because they've got the whole Amazon ecosystem. It's the #1 player, and you just need to overcome the translation skills, and you're up and running. And in fact, if you're interested in that market, we can put you in touch. We've got a number of agency customers of our platform who service international sellers going into Japan specifically. So happy to put you in touch with some of those if that's of interest to you. Then South Korea and Taiwan. These are really markets that completely stand alone. They're difficult to enter, not just because of language, but also the competition or the marketplaces here are mostly domestic. So, and they work quite differently. So it's very hard to leverage any sort of existing experience around Amazon or eBay or sort of other Western marketplaces in these markets. So very hard to crack. And as you can see, the percentage of international sellers on these marketplaces is quite low. So certainly, South Korea and Taiwan would be towards the end of my list in terms of marketplace expansion, simply because they're hard to enter, but they're also very mature. So the competition there in terms of sellers and marketplaces, they know what they're doing. So it's a tough game in those markets. Now, just circling back to Indonesia, last but not least, if you can see the next slide, Ryan, I think Indonesia is really worth watching, particularly Tokopedia. So there's some really big news earlier this week around the fact that Tokopedia, which is the largest sort of e-commerce player and marketplace in Indonesia, is actually merging with Gojek. So think of Gojek as the Uber of Indonesia, but instead of cars, think scooters. But they do a whole range of other things, food delivery and the like. Putting these two big e-commerce players together to form the GoTo group is a really interesting development. I think it makes them the third largest e-commerce business in the whole region. So I think it's a really exciting space to watch, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to take some of this to expand to other parts of Southeast Asia too. So stay tuned and make sure you add Tokopedia or GoTo group to your news feeds. Of course, just to finish up, a quick plug for our product. If you are a professional marketplace seller or professional marketplace agencies, and you're looking for a solution to save you lots of time in terms of not having to log on to the back of Seller Central and the like, you want to see all of your e-commerce channels in one platform, and you want a bit of help in some quick pointers in terms of where you need to focus to drive sales or to improve your profits or operations. head to our website, and as a participant of this podcast, you can claim a great discount as well. So we're offering 50% off on our enterprise plans. So yeah, go to the link in this presentation and you can activate it from there.
Absolutely. And like Paul said, and I mentioned earlier, if you didn't see my mouth moving, I was talking. If you're watching this or listening to this later on, you can actually go ahead and click on the comment section or the link below on the YouTube channel. Just go ahead and find Ping Pong Payments on YouTube. All of these gentlemen's companies, their contact information, and the links that we're talking about today are all going to be embedded in the YouTube page as well. So catch us later, or if they share them out, go ahead and check out the YouTube page as well. These gentlemen are offering great incentives. Obviously, if you want to work with them or they need a solution, or just reach out to them to look at consultation to work in Southeast Asia. Of course, other opportunities as well. That's the places to check out. So thank you, Paul. That's very informative. Like I said, I can't believe we have to follow that information. So thanks for all that as well. So as always, like he drops the hot statistics and all the news. We get to follow it up with taxes, logistics, and payments. So thanks for that.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, of course, as always, we have Mr. Jonathan Matthews of VAT Global. It's late for him, so we are going to go ahead so that he can get to bed, or if he has got more work to do, talk about Southeast Asia and what VAT means selling there. Jonathan, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Paul. It's always great coming after you. But I've taken a slightly different approach, and I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on digital service clients. And the reason being is majority of the clients that we're actually servicing in this space are digital service clients. So that would really mean someone selling a subscription service, whether that be music or fitness apps during lockdown, and the VAT that follows around those or that type of service is evolving very quickly. Now, whilst there might be a lot of growth in those spaces from a compliance perspective and the clients that we're seeing, the focus still seems to be on Europe and then European customers going to the US or Canada. Japan, kind of mirroring what Paul said, is probably your next biggest Amazon market outside of, call it, Australia from a VAT perspective. So I just thought it there in terms of who might be listening and who might be selling into that space, focusing on the digital service element. We will talk a little bit about physical products as we go through it, but it seems that's where the tax laws are evolving the quickest, and that's where you're going to see the biggest change. So just for example, in 2020, 12 countries introduced digital service tax laws, and we're expecting another 19 to implement digital service tax laws, many of those in Southeast Asia. So I think if we can go to one slide. Yeah, okay. So the current VAT situation in Southeast Asia is that, again, it's mostly driven by this digital tax service for non-physical goods. And some Southeast Asian countries actually apply indirect taxes to the sale of physical goods. There are some, it's not all. And that's kind of what makes this area somewhat unique, is that there is a concept where the buyer is responsible for the taxes, and that's just the way that it's been set up, at least for now. So we do somewhat expect that as these markets mature and evolve, as Paul said, you can see there's quite a difference between, call it Japan, the most advanced one, and maybe Vietnam, which has just introduced certain legislation, that we will see these rules evolve and change. And generally that's kind of how these things happen, is within one area, you get the rule created and then others follow suit as the market matures, and call it Lazada comes in, and Shopee and Amazon and Rakuten. And as they all enter these markets, all of a sudden the rules really standardize. We actually saw the standardization in the Middle East, in KSA, UAE, Israel. So we're somewhat expecting that. Now, in terms of your ongoing obligations, it's very standard that once you are VAT registered or GST registered, the frequency at which you're required to submit your returns is annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, bi-monthly. The concept is very similar. Once you're registered, you need to then submit these periodic returns. So if we can just go to the next slide, you'll see that to a large degree, have mirrored the countries that Paul has done. I feel as though Paul goes into great detail to really show you the statistics behind these countries, that it really just makes my job a lot easier to make sure I just mirror from a VAT perspective. So I really have just listed them. Some have obligations, some don't, but rest assured, these are really your main countries that you would be selling into at this stage, at least from a market size perspective, a maturity perspective, and really a growth opportunity. We can just go to the next slide. You'll see here that this is a unique scenario where we haven't really, or at least I haven't mentioned in any country yet, in the 3 previous webinars, where you cannot VAT register. And 3 countries in this part of the world you can't. There's no concept of it. So that would be the Philippines, Myanmar, and China. China being the interesting one in that it is a very mature market, at least locally, but foreign businesses need to register an entity, or the ability to trade is limited from a compliance perspective. So the customer experience is not really great. You can't really ship your goods direct to end users without a stop at the border and then the customer paying certain taxes. So the actual experience for non-Chinese sellers, e-commerce, is very, very complicated from a compliance perspective. We can go to the next slide. I have tried to split it out. That's just a no concept of a registration. Now you got the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is when you make one sale, you're required to register in these countries. Now, that can create 2 different schools of thought. One is, I'm going to trade non-compliantly to prove concept that there's value in, call it Vietnam. Do I want to go and spend money becoming registered from the first sale? The other school is, the cost to register outweighs making one sale and I'm just not going to sell. And it does create for these scenarios where not everyone trading there is compliant, and a lot of businesses don't want to trade because the market is still maturing. South Korea being the interesting one is that it's very mature. And you often find that when you do cross that threshold, there's a lot of value to be had there. Vietnam, we have, had a lot of interest, and I think during the lockdown period and the ease of selling a digital service, there's no logistics specifically, you can really just download the product. We have seen a lot of interest in this area, and we are foreseeing a lot of growth in this space. Generally, digital service is not detached from physical product, in that when the one is growing, the other is growing with it. So in that sense, the opportunity is definitely large in this part of the world. And I think a lot of businesses don't really see this as the next growth opportunity. They see the more mature markets as ones where they can grow into, and that's actually potentially the wrong or a difficult route to go. Sometimes the difficulty of getting into the area and then having a little bit of a free run or a little bit of an easier run is generally more beneficial than just going into the mature market. And again, we do see that with a lot of our sellers. So if we go to the next slide, here we have your markets where we often foresee the most activity. So Indonesia has a digital service regime. Bangladesh has a digital service regime. Thailand, Malaysia, India, and Taiwan. India, I've actually got incorrect on the threshold. The threshold's 22,000 euros, not 1.5 million. That was I wouldn't even call that a spelling mistake. It's just too far different. But you also see that Singapore, India, Japan, and Taiwan have a physical product threshold. So that's where this area is very complex, in that some have no threshold, some have a digital service threshold, some have a null threshold, and some have both. And we're expecting a lot more to land up in a India, Taiwan type of situation, which is a US, a Canada, a Europe situation where you have thresholds for both, and you have the concept of a non-VAT or a non-resident registration. So as these markets mature, you will begin to foresee that it becomes easier to become compliant. And we see a trend where the easier the level of compliance, the higher the competition in terms of the service, which brings the cost down. And often that is followed by a huge influx when sellers know that these are the steps to become compliant, these are the costs. And the costs across the world from a Europe, Australia, US, Canada perspective are very low. They've been driven down through that competition. So sellers are often put off by excessive fees to become compliant in these countries. And you see a lot of these countries actually targeting very big brands to become that registered as opposed to everyone, because they're aware that it's just not going to happen and they almost want the services to be provided. So it's kind of this game of cat and mouse where your team viewers, your Zooms, your LinkedIns are being forced to VAT register and account for VAT. And then your smaller applications are really left to service the market and grow and expand and more come in. And as you grow, you're then kind of pulled into you need to be compliant space. So it's a very interesting space to be watching. I'm not sure many people would agree that watching it from a tax VAT perspective would find it interesting, but to see the evolution is intriguing. And then just the second last slide here, which is your general VAT rates. Now, generally speaking, your VAT rate is a indication of the strength of your economy. And a lot of the times, your big economies have a high VAT rate and your emerging markets have a low VAT rate, which is quite inverse in many ways. But again, it allows for you to enter the market and the cost of your goods is not going up by 20%. The maximum here is 15 in Bangladesh, and then you're averaging below 10%. So if you are thinking of kind of entering this space and worried about the tax or tax obligation costs, you can see there that it's actually one of the cheaper areas to service from that rate perspective. And then as always, anyone that's listening to the webinar or anyone that's interested in kind of having discussions around these taxes, these obligations, how they affect you, what's required depending on what you do, we're always interested in listening and connecting. And I think the same offer has applied across the board, which is 10% off your registration fee and really an in-depth discussion with one of our onboarding specialists. So we'll understand your business, we'll really look through your sales data, determine where and when and if you need to be registered, and then kind of explain how we'll be able to assist you. So yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan, in terms of explaining that a little bit more in terms of what we need to do in terms of compliance for each of those countries. I didn't know that there was only, you said 3 or 4, I forget the number specifically, that weren't VAT compliant, and they just didn't have that, that position available for people. So it's interesting to have to navigate those waters specifically in that region. So I'm always learning something from you guys. You guys are great. So that being said, I'm going to pass it off to logistics and shipping. Of course, bro, our friends from Novaland over, your good buddy Francois, who's going to help us figure out how to navigate the waters, if you will, no pun intended, over there in Southeast Asia. Francois, why don't you kick us off with what you guys are talking about today?
Yeah, thank you. The dad with the dad jokes.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk definitely about logistics. It's not as robust as the US and the EU, although it is one of the largest markets. So we'll definitely dive a bit into it. Right now, just a few things to take into consideration is that we are still facing this global container shortage. So that I just wanted to get a few housekeeping items out of the way first. So with just naturally thinking of a lot of the containers that are coming out of Asia and naturally going to the EU, going to Australia, to the UK, and to the US. This itself, you would think that this causes containers, them wanting to fill those containers and bring them back to Asia, and for that to be super cheap, which is the case in part. You can definitely get them for a very, very small fraction of what you would from China, let's say, to the US. Let's say if that's $10,000, you probably get it for about $1,000, maybe a little bit more for going to from the US back to Asia. And we'll dive into all that. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but yeah, let's dive a little bit into the containers and talk about shipping to Southeast Asia. And there's a lot of ways to think about this, right? You can think of this from a perspective of being in China and manufacturers actually selling into Southeast Asia from China directly, which is the case. I know I did a lot of research in the case where that's a lot of what happened once we started entering some of the trade war back in 2018. It's China and a lot of manufacturers in Southeast Asia started looking inward and started realizing that they had to actually diversify even their portfolio. So rather than just purely sticking to B2B and doing more of this traditional manufacturing for businesses, they started to look inward into Southeast Asia and look more B2C. So even when you're looking at, the marketplaces in Vietnam and Indonesia and in India and Bangladesh, all these different countries, there likely are a lot of Chinese sellers that are also selling in those markets. So just going back to the shipping aspect of it, taking into consideration that a lot of these major platforms will have their own distribution channels, and those sometimes tend to be in Hong Kong, which I believe Hong Kong has no import duties. And Jonathan, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe shipping into Hong Kong has no import duties. And those marketplaces that Paul was talking about earlier, they typically have a fulfillment process very similar to fulfilled by Amazon. If you just type in fulfilled by, enter the marketplace itself, their policies would likely come up. Some of them are a little bit more strict than others and have, more of the larger you are, the more we'll work with you policy. Some of them are very open just to be able to get more sellers in their marketplace itself. So just keeping in mind that you could ship them to Hong Kong and avoid import duties there. But you can also ship them into Vietnam. You could ship them into Malaysia. And you're able to distribute typically through a 3PL from those countries themselves too, throughout the rest of Southeast Asia. So also, what I was talking about earlier when it comes to the global container shortage still being in effect, I wanted to bring that up really because just because we do have a massive overload of containers in the US and in the EU that need to go back into Asia, it doesn't mean that they're very easy to book. Just keeping in mind that a lot of these carriers, their goal is really to maximize the dollar value of those containers that they lease out. And so what that means is if they're charging right now, let's say a container from Ningbo to Texas, wherever in Texas, let's say it's about $13,000. And that same container to ship it back and let's say to use let's say in the agriculture world, or if you're having products made in the USA and you wanted to ship those back, if you're able to get that for about $1,200, well, that's going to delay the container from actually being able to go back to China, do another round for another $12,000. And even if that delays it by a week or two, that's money that they're losing. In the effect of about 1/10 of it is what they're going to be making. So a lot of times it will be still very hard if you are shipping, let's say, made in the USA or made in Germany or any of these other countries outside of Southeast Asia going back into Asia. It's still going to be extremely hard to book those. And major players are even struggling to actually book those containers. Some weeks they're saying, 5 to 10 week lead times from the cargo ready dates or the CRDs, as some of you guys may know of them. So that's important to realize. But yeah, I touched on, the containers are a fraction of the price. So it is significantly cheaper to ship from the US into Asia compared to vice versa, as I'm sure everyone is experiencing right now. It's really just that availability and how much those carriers actually want to give out. So keeping that in mind. Air freight, definitely an option. It's hard with the travel restrictions still in place. And with travel just not being as high to Southeast Asia. So you are going to see elevated prices, but air freight is definitely still an option. And the second point is last mile delivery. So definitely top of mind for everyone. I don't care if I have my products there, could be sitting in a warehouse. How am I going to get them to the customers themselves? Well, it's not as robust as Amazon in the sense that they have their own logistics centers throughout everywhere. They are starting to work towards that within Southeast Asia. A lot of these larger marketplaces are in particular. And so you would have to check out, again, what their policies are. If you could ship directly to their fulfillment centers in Hong Kong, they're probably going to do all the picking, packing, labeling, and shipping to the final destination. And a lot of them even handle reverse logistics. So, and what I mean by reverse logistics is when your customers are actually returning their packages, let's say there's damage, defective, they just don't like it. If they're returning those packages, those marketplaces will take them for you. But if not, there are 3PL options, again, based in Hong Kong or based in other parts of Southeast Asia. And we are starting to see a rise in 3PLs globally. So really finding the right partner, not just finding the cheapest partner, because it is going to be significantly cheaper than storing in the US or even storing in the EU. So not going with the cheapest, but going with the one that's right for your business. Because remember, this is another part of the world that you're going to have to trust them with your goods. You're going to have to trust that they store them well, that they ship them out correctly, label them correctly, and treat them right. That way they have some long storage lives. So boxme.asia is just one example. If you wanted to type that into your search bar, I know that that's one 3PL that's very well known in Southeast Asia for fulfillment specifically. And if you have a manufacturer in China that you're working with, that might be an opportunity for partnerships when it comes to your investments and your product development and their manufacturing capabilities. And they are able to fulfill, like I said earlier, into these different marketplaces. And then lastly, just, keeping compliance in mind. I know I touched on this a lot with Australia and New Zealand, as well as the EU and the US. But it's even more so, I would say, in Southeast Asia, just from what we've seen. So there's some obvious one, counterfeit goods. That's about it. Actually, that would be very obvious. Some of these marketplaces restrict you from shipping in used goods or secondhand goods. There's some religious items within certain countries that you can't actually ship to. I know at least one of those marketplaces that Paul was talking about, you are not allowed to ship in oversized items to the fulfillment centers. They can only handle the small parcels effectively, so they can actually store them for cheaply and ship them directly to the customer for a pretty cost-effective manner. And hazardous goods, drugs, firearms, weapons, and even some weapon lookalikes. So keeping in mind things like BB guns and water pellet guns. These are all things that may be regulated within those countries. And so you would have to check out what those policies are.
Francois, what's the best place to do that? Do you know if it's just through Amazon's Seller Central forum, or what's the best place to do that in your mind?
To
look up shipping before counterfeits or any of those compliance within each country.
Yeah, I mean, I would just Google it. Just Google what products are prohibited from selling on insert platform in XYZ country. And I would check out all the countries that they're actually selling in. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Taiwan, like all these different countries. Make sure you just Google them and make sure that your products will be compliant. And usually the platforms themselves will actually have a list of what's compliant, what's not compliant, or what might spark a red flag.
Is there anything? Sorry, I'll pull myself up here so you can see my face. Is there anything surprising that you've seen, or any of your clients that have tried to send in products where it is just really honestly surprising. Whoops, I'm gonna do that. Surprising once they sent their goods already there, they were just shut down before they entered either warehousing or that country.
Yeah, I don't have too much experience firsthand with it.
Okay.
From what I researched and just looking up, what products are, falling outside of compliance. There's some where it's like liquids. An interesting fact with liquids of not letting it go above a certain amount, and it's a very, very small amount. And then when I say like oversized items, so God, it just slips my mind right now. Paul, maybe you could correct me with this. But it's one of the two major marketplaces within the countries that you're talking about. Might have been Lazada, but they don't do oversized goods whatsoever. I don't remember which one it is.
Paul, do you maybe have any insight for Lazada for oversized goods?
I'm the same spot as you, Francois.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to tell you. Let me Google it right now, and I'll try and get you guys an answer.
That's what everyone's here for us to Google their answers. But that's the thing is where I think this is important to note that even us, we have to challenge specific entity or specific ideas, because everything a seller can be as big as selling really huge containers of, refrigerators or something like that, because as Freon and other chemicals in that, it might have different requirements in order to sell that specific product, or it can just be something like a pen, and have specific chemicals in it. So the size doesn't typically traditionally matter as all the time. It can be the contents within it. It could be a number of different things. So that's why, just to preface, sometimes we have to do our own research in that regards, as simple as it might be.
Google should be everyone's best friend.
Exactly. If we're not in Google, or yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in the case of Lazada, and I think it might be the same for Shopee, they offer like this parallel approach, right? So for domestic sellers, you've got local warehouses in different countries, because a lot of the domestic sellers will just focus on one or two countries and ship from there. For international sellers coming into their ecosystem, they will say, actually, you need to ship it into Hong Kong. That's kind of the key point, and we go from there. So I suspect different restrictions will apply to both scenarios too.
Well, I think Shopee, is it Shopee? Yeah, I think Shopee is also one of the ones that you have to be a certain size of seller for them to handle all your fulfillment. I believe it's that one. Again, I could be very wrong, could be Lazada, but it's one of them where you have to be a specific size. You have to be very well-established brand. For example, Under Armour, Nike, all these major brands are starting to make their move into Southeast Asia. And, as their major brands, of course, they're going to start to penetrate those markets and really build this infrastructure for foreign companies to start to move there. So just keeping in mind that these are great marketplaces. Paul laid it out beautifully. Jonathan definitely touched a lot on the compliance and the VAT. So, keep a lookout, rewind, make sure you listen to their sections for why you should go into Southeast Asia. When it comes to the shipping itself, just depends on where you're shipping it from. There's way too many different import and export countries that you could be shipping it from, depending on your product niche. Could be made in the USA, could be made in China, and you're just shipping it to Hong Kong, and you're fulfilling it from Hong Kong to these different Southeast Asian countries. So I couldn't list them all out, but it's pretty straightforward when it comes to just fulfillment. They have all the different fulfillment capabilities that we do here in the US as well as they do in the EU.
Excellent. Sorry, we got off track there. That's my question side of things. The Q&A portion of Ryan's, into shipping logistics is over. So, there we go. That was already at the end of it.
Yep, that was the end. It was pretty short and sweet. So yeah, just like every other roundtable that we've had, we do have an exclusive offer, free 1-hour consultation with one of our experts for your entire supply chain, just reviewing any problems that you might be having, any efficiencies that you might be able to bring to the table. And yeah, if you're looking to source a new product or you have samples that need to be consolidated, you can also get that for free. So yeah, you just hit sign up and use a referral code. That is,
I think the coupon code actually is in the description. If you go to YouTube, if you're watching this on Facebook, just hop over to Ping Pong Payments YouTube channel, check it out on this video. We'll make sure that it gets shared on LinkedIn as well. for all the channels that we're sharing this on. So if you're watching it again, believe it or not, I forgot to mention this. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, the beauty about this is it's an interactive thing. We can see if you're watching or not on an uncreepy way or an oversight way. We can see that people are tuned in. And again, we know that people are watching today. If they have questions, you can actually submit those on the comment section, and we can go ahead and answer those. Again, for our panel of either Francois, Jonathan, or Paul, or myself, we're more than happy to answer those questions if you have them. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to them directly. All those are going to be in the comment section, no matter where we're watching. So awesome stuff as always, Francois. And then kind of concluding it, want to briefly touch on the payment side of things, because with Ping Pong Payments, as everyone knows, with the cross-border section of the world, it's important to know that, let me go ahead and hop up here. It's important to know that as Amazon sellers, even though you might be selling in different countries around the world, we've harped on this in the past 3 segments of this show, of the series, excuse me, of that no matter the marketplace you might be in, you as a seller might not be in that same marketplace. So when you're sending and receiving payments internationally, there's going to be costs associated with it. We've hammered out on that a lot with Amazon, but we've talked a lot about different marketplaces in Southeast Asia. It's important to know that as a seller, as your operations begin to grow, and as money is coming and going, especially in all these marketplaces that you as a seller, you as a brand or an entity are growing, it's important to have all those funds go into one ecosystem instead of having accounts where you don't have that holistic viewpoint, right? If your funds are tied up in inventory, or if your funds are in different marketplaces, or just knowing that as we see there's growth potential in all these different marketplace channels. We talked about Shopee, we talked about Lazada. All those marketplaces are going to yield different for each seller depending on the goods that you're offering. So it's important to know that when you are breaking into those new marketplaces, you want to be able to have that insight in terms of income, and then being able to convert that at a manageable fee and the best fee out there as possible. So that's where Ping Pong really excels at. We're not just an Amazon solution. Our company is a e-commerce solution, just like the rest of these gentlemen. We're not just one entity and one solution. We help across the board, no matter if you're selling just on Amazon or on these marketplaces that do exist around the world. And I started this show, this part 4, with a pretty crazy statistic. And that statistic was that most, if not more than 50% of 2020 sales were done in Asia, Southeast Asia entity. Again, that's in India, China. We didn't touch on those major components our gentleman talked about. It's going to be 3 parts just for China, 3 parts just for India alone. But that being said, these segments in terms of Singapore, where they have their own area of Amazon, it's super important to know that collectively the GMV, or the global market value of this region, is actually 4th highest in the entire world. So collectively, with all these entities added up, you're talking a massive opportunity for international business growth. So that being said, just think about that with the other types of marketplaces that we talked about today, the other types of shipping opportunities, and with certain tax not being available, there's growth opportunity, and keep an eye on those marketplaces. So that's kind of where I wanted to cap this presentation, this series, this part 4, if you will, of the whole thing. And I'll bring it back, everyone, to kind of bounce it around, gentlemen, is what is the most exciting opportunity that we think is going to move forward? We saw 2020 kind of really fast forward opportunity and growth for businesses, people coming online for the first time, people selling online already. They were going to grow exponentially. 2020 was a lot of people's best years, but even this first third of this 2021 year, a lot of growth has happened, and it hasn't slowed down. It's actually doubled where normal growth on Amazon would be here, but it actually sped up 2 years. So that being said, what's kind of our forecast for the rest of the year? Do we have any insights, predictions, analyses that based upon the first third of this year?
Yeah, supply chain's going to suck the rest of the year. I'll tell you that. Just wanted to
We
be
already know
completely
this,
honest.
Francois. Come on,
I
that's not a
wanted to be
prediction.
honest with everyone. 2021 is not the year where supply chain is going to bounce back by any means. So this is not a time where you should be penny pinching. It's a time where you need to find right partners. And I think everyone here provides a great solution for a lot of different sellers to expand and to think outside of the box and find those solutions. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to touch on supply chain just a little bit.
Yeah, look, I actually agree. I mean, I think we're saying this is a great year, and actually it's good. Obviously, COVID, everyone knows this. COVID has driven a real change in habits, and looks like a lot of those habits are here to stay. You know, people a bit like working from home, people very reluctant to go back to the office, or at least full time, at least here in Australia.
Not Jonathan. He wants to be out of his home.
Yeah.
He's ready to go.
I'm just thinking like this year.
I want to be back in the
GMV
pub, not in the office.
That's all right. Oh, the pub. Yeah, not the office.
Look, from a GMV growth, obviously it's going to be a big year, but you know, what if, right? What if supply chain was running smoothly globally right now? Imagine the sort of numbers we could hit this year. So, you know, I think actually it's probably sort of the biggest kind of the throttle. No, and clearly I'm not blaming you, Francois. I know you're trying to solve these things, but obviously it is an issue. Look, I am just super excited that it's not just the consumers that sort of are buying more and we're seeing more volumes, but it's also the sellers that I think they're now starting to think about expansion, thinking wider, deeper, you know, about, you know, they're both, particularly so in the US, there's a lot of debates. You know, I put up a poll last week and said, right, let's assume, you know, you're tapping out on Amazon US, where do you go next? And it was really interesting response. Like about half the people said, no, there's always more you can do on Amazon. You know, here are 25,000 ideas you could still do. And, you know, I love that attitude, but likewise, other people say, right, okay, let's do Walmart, let's do, you know, Amazon Europe, you know, I'm going to start building a, you know, Shopify site. I'm going to expand into different platforms, markets, you know, and it's just great to see that real drive. And, you know, I love seeing people really building quite, you know, big businesses on marketplaces and being super successful. So, you know, it's a very exciting space at the moment, especially for those that are obviously owning and running their brand. I think it's a bit of a different story for, you know, distributors and you know, people that sell things on that belong to other people. But yeah, brand owners, very, very exciting space in the next 12 months.
I will very much agree with Paul there. I think what I'm seeing a lot of is when the pressure's on, the creativity comes out. And the uniqueness of a lot of the products that we're seeing, as opposed to I'm just reselling something that someone made somewhere else, seems to be here to stay. And I think that we as the end consumer are going to get the benefit of that. So I think whether it be unique applications which are not really affected by the supply chain, that is definitely going to grow. And a lot of people, whether it be I don't want to go back to work, or I don't want to go back to the gym, or I don't want to go back to anything, and I'm going to find a way to do it at home in the comfort of my home. Those types of products, I think, are here to stay. And I also just love the creativity of people building big businesses and brands. And I think e-commerce has matured a lot in the last year. You've got to be specific. You've got to be calculated. And if you can, opportunity exists. And on so many marketplaces, in so many different locations, it's really where you choose to put your focus, you can find that success. So yeah, best of luck to all those that are willing to put it on the line. I think there's a lot of opportunity for you.
Right. And we talk about it on our podcast, at least my podcast, and I know Francois talked about it too. Barrier to entry has become higher, but that weeds out, and we've seen this in the news too, gentlemen, if you know, bad actors, there's no place in the space for it anymore. People are doing it more legitimately. They're moving businesses online, getting smarter, becoming more creative. They're doing things the right way. And that's where people are going to see more fruits of their labor kind of come to fruition.
And we get the benefits.
Right. Absolutely. And it's good for the buyers too, because it's good for cost. It's good for quality of product, if you will. Right. It's only to benefit the end of the end consumer. And that's why Amazon has always said it's all about the buyer. It's always about what's going to enhance their, you know, their buying solution. And I think everyone's trying to catch up and figure out how can we best serve the end consumer. And that's where you see things of just completely wiping away big time sellers on marketplaces, even though it's bringing revenue for a marketplace. It's ultimately not the right way to do it. It's deceptive. It's just a bad taste in your mouth. So I think that's where you continue to see innovation and growth, new advertising solutions. We're seeing DSP becoming an option. You're becoming payment options with your suppliers. Actually, terms are becoming different, right? Francois, you would probably agree with this. Of terms are extended even longer now. You can store within their factories more because of trying to plan out farther in advance. 2020 is somewhat of 2021, is somewhat interesting year because, again, logistics and buying goods internationally, we talked about shortage of raw materials, right, Francois? We talked about just shortage of, in general, of containers and whatnot. But if you fast forward and look at the calendar in general, everyone's talking about bad lead times. And this is not a knock to you, but a knock to just goods in general worldwide. It's not just online goods, it's grocery, it's all these different kinds of entities that are being shipped around the world. In general, furniture, it could be electronics, it could be anything. Costs are going up and down all the time. But also, if you look at just factories in general, in China, which is the #1 producer of goods in the world, we have the Olympics that's happening in 2021 in off a year. So we have to plan for that, which is happening in January or the summer. It's just all these kinds of things that are going to be happening that you have to always continue to think about. Is this going to affect me as a business owner that we might not think about otherwise? Obviously, Chinese New Year and so things globally, everyone's mindset has to be wrapped around. It's not just impacting me as a seller, it impacts me globally, all my consumers around the world. So that being said, I think that's the opportunity in general. That's why you see aggregators and companies who are purchasing these brands online. Their opportunity is growth internationally. And that's why we wanted to highlight this series, is because internationally, it may pale in comparison to North America right now, but as the world kind of catches up, technology grows, buyers continue to get smarter, you're going to see that opportunity flourish around the world.
Yeah, it's starting to mature very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Innovation and where people innovate, and that I truly think like our businesses all together are trying to innovate in their spaces. That will continue to lead the way in how quickly and how effectively people can continue to make money online as sellers or businesses, and how sellers will continue to move more of their money online. That trend isn't going anywhere but up. Just how quickly that steep incline is going to be just really depends on the innovation of companies like ours altogether. So that being said, I don't see any questions popping in here. I understand like around the world, people are just like looking at numbers. There's lots of craziness happening, an opportunity. But gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for hopping on and committing to 4 parts of, we've never done this before. I don't know if any of our companies have done this before in terms of really hammering down all these different entities. Paul mentioned too, there's so much more opportunity. We can kind of get more granular into countries like China, India, where there's lots of growth opportunities. We just felt like these are the top 4 that needed to be talked about that we'd all could really cover. So I want to thank each of you for somewhat dedicating and committing to it ahead of time until we knew what it really truly looked like. So thank you so much. And any parting words, words of wisdom or smart aleck remarks, if you will?
Paul's not going first next time.
Yeah. No, if we do this again, Paul's going last. He's going to be our cleanup hitter.
No, I just want to say, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, guys. It's been really interesting, actually, some really good debates, and it's been really good to get into some of the, I know on one level it's just on the surface, but actually looking at some other geographies that aren't talked about as much, getting into some of that nitty-gritty stuff that you're going to have to face as a seller and challenge you have to overcome. I really enjoyed it, and actually I've learned a lot from you guys as well. So I just want to say thank you for I guess driving this series, Ryan, and allowing me to be part of it.
Of course, and everyone, obviously, I'm sure our paths will cross as the world will open up eventually and inevitably, hopefully in the best way that is for people. Obviously, we're in different countries around the world: Australia, England, and then obviously the United States. So that being said, each of us we're all kind of figuring out as we go. So when that happens and the world opens up fully, I'm sure our paths will all cross again in general, and in person. So that being said, thank you so much, Paul from MerchantSpring.io, Francois from Novaland, and Jonathan Matthews of VAT Global. I'm Ryan Kramer with Ping Pong Payments. Thanks again for watching us, everyone on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure you check out the comments section for how to get in touch with these gentlemen or Ping Pong Payments. All of us have great offers out there. If you do want to get into certain entities or areas of e-commerce and need help with that solution, check out one of our 4 companies and make sure that you just ask questions. That's the best way to learn and best way to grow. So that being said, thanks for joining this e-commerce roundtable series. We'll catch you guys next time.